Hey, what's up, crew? This is Mr. White here. I'm really sorry that I'm not in to help you guys learn all this good stuff. I've got a bit of a tummy ache. It's been a rough morning for your boy Bradley White, but that's cool. We're going to get through that, and we're going to talk to you today about satire techniques. So these are some of the primary techniques that artists, writers, whoever uses to create satirical work. This is, of course, in conjunction with things like palette or framing or composition or value. And all of these different things work together to make that satirical point clearer for the audience. Now, our first technique is going to be allegory. The reason this is first is because it really is the umbrella term that kind of covers everything. Basically, a lot of satire is going to be an allegory, which is a story, a poem, a picture, a movie, whatever, that can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning. And most of the time, this hidden meaning is some kind of a moral or political lesson. We look at our example here, we've got Bugs Bunny with the old tortoise there. This is the tortoise and the hare allegory. So if we look at the surface, it's about a bunny and a turtle, and they have a race. But if we interrogate it a little further, we realize that this is trying to teach us a hidden lesson. It has a hidden meaning that we should slow down, take our times, and do things correctly, rather than just speeding along like a crazy person. So what we want you to do now is take a moment or two to find your own example of allegory, whatever that might be, and post it in the class Padlet. We're going to take a look at these on Wednesday to see how we did in terms of understanding this language. Go ahead and pause, take a moment, find your allegory. Next, we have perennial favorite, hyperbole. Hyperbole is extreme exaggeration, and this last part is key. The exaggeration has to be to make a point or to emphasize some kind of an idea. Right? It's the opposite of understatement, which we'll talk about in a moment. But if we take a look at our example here, we see this cat walking around with this sign, hyperbole is going to kill us all. An obvious exaggeration, kind of making fun of the idea of exaggeration in the first place, making a point about the way that people exaggerate problems. Once again, pause our recording, find your own example, and post it in that there Padlet. Next, we have understatement. Understatement is also very closely connected to sarcasm. They're not always the same, but very frequently sarcasm involves understatement. And this is a statement that represents something like a problem or an issue or a situation as smaller or less intense or even less important than it really is. Again, in order to make a point, in order to emphasize that it really is a big deal. And here we look at our example. This is a cartoon, somebody looking at the California wildfires, and he's saying, "I'm not having a nice day." Obviously, that is an understatement, a comedic understatement, because the dude is having a really bad day. It underscores and emphasizes this fact by making it seem less intense or less important than it actually is. Go ahead and find your own. Pause this sucker. Throw it in that Padlet. So now we have caricature. Caricature is very important. It is a picture, description, or imitation of a person in which certain characteristics, usually physical characteristics, are exaggerated to create either a really funny effect or to make that person look more grotesque or disgusting. These exaggerations sometimes comment on the personality flaws of the subject. Not always, but sometimes they do. We can see that with our middle one there when it comes to Trump, kind of like insinuating that he is like thin-skinned or a baby, whereas if we look at the Joe Biden and Barack Obama caricatures, it's really just kind of more about making them look grotesque or foolish. Go ahead and find your own example, post it up on the Padlet, and that brings us to visual distortion. Visual distortion is another big term because it covers a lot of ground. Visual distortion is any change made by an artist to the size, the shape, the visual characteristics of a drawing, of an image, of a person to help express an idea, convey a feeling, or visual impact. So we obviously see this in caricature. Caricature cannot exist without visual distortion. And if we're looking at our Kaczynski examples here, we see there's an abstract quality when we're thinking about visual distortion. The idea of these heads floating away, very, very strange, changing the character to help express that idea. Down here, we'll see these politicians being represented as bullets, shrinking them down, changing their size to help convey a feeling or enhance visual impact. You might be noticing that visual distortion seems to have a lot of overlap with symbolism as well, and you'd be right. Frequently, we use visual distortion to create a symbolic effect to enhance our satire. Once again, find your own example and post it in the class, and I'll tell you this one, just Googling visual distortion is going to give you a bunch of garbage. You're going to have to think a little bit harder about this one to find a meaningful example that doesn't totally stink. Finally, one that we've touched on before, but we would be remiss if we did not talk about, and that is situational irony. Situational irony is when the opposite of what is expected in a given situation occurs. So, whatever we would normally expect, those expectations are subverted and we see the opposite. Now, that word opposite is important to keep in mind. Obviously, there's a subjective quality to what is the opposite of a situation, but you want to generally keep it within those parameters. You're thinking opposites. We look at that, we see it in our cartoon here. What you got framed there says the bird. The turtle says a speeding ticket, a ha ha ha, because that's the opposite of what we would expect a turtle to have mounted on his wall, a speeding ticket. Turtles can't go fast, that's crazy. See what I'm saying here? You see what I'm saying, gang? And we usually use situational irony to allow writers and artists to create contrasts between expectations and reality. Once again, find your own irony. Sorry, I'm drinking some tea. Find your own example and post it in the class Padlet. But let's take a look at Kaczynski stuff and see if we can find all of these different techniques in there. So we're looking for hyperbole, understatement, caricature, visual distortion, allegory, and situational irony. If we look at our piece right here on the right, it's called Pokemon Go. I think this is a good piece because it really does contain every single one of these techniques. And let's talk about how. So hyperbole. There's an obvious exaggeration here of people staring down at their phones. His neck is cranked really long. He's staring directly down. This is a clear exaggeration of someone whose neck is craned over all the time. But there's also understatement. If we look at the subject's face, let's try this thing out. If we look at the subject's face right here, we see that it has a very placid expression, as though this is no big deal. This is completely normal, nothing happening here, despite the fact that he has a, magical little creature on his back. I would call that understatement, given the circumstances, trying to show us how normal it is that we are completely subject to our phones. We have caricature. We absolutely have caricature. That exaggerated stooped neck is not going to be seen in real people. That's going to be caricaturized of this person to exaggerate the fact that they are glued to their phone. And that visual distortion, that goes with the neck as well. We are exaggerating the size and the characteristics of it, but we're also making this entire image visually distorted by doing something really unrealistic. Little creatures don't ride people with saddles. So depicting that within this is going to be visual distortion. It's making something new, changing the characteristics of a normal picture of somebody leaning over and looking at their phone. Do we have situational irony? You better believe it. So the situational irony here, we're supposed to be controlling the Pokemon, right? That's the entire idea of the game. We're supposed to be in charge of this stuff. But here we can see that the Pokemon is riding us. It has a bit in the subject's mouth. It's in control. That is situational irony. That's the opposite of what we would expect. And then finally, our allegory. Like most satire, it has some kind of hidden meaning. And this is not telling us, isn't this funny that this Pokemon is controlling this sad sack loser with his gray shirt? No, it's telling us that we have to stop being controlled by our phones. We have to begin taking back our lives in that respect. So that's pretty much it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. You're now going to go on and do some independent analysis. Have a great day. I look forward to seeing you soon.